And if there's one person I do not envy right now, it's Theresa May. Every day brings a fresh problem. Defence Secretary Michael Fallon lost his job over allegations of sexual harassment. Development Secretary Priti Patel has finally gone after meeting senior members of the Israeli government without telling her boss. Damien Green, May's number 2, is under investigation for allegations over his conduct, which he denies. Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson could go after making an incorrect statement about a Briton being held in Iran. It goes on. And even the Chancellor could be in trouble if the budget goes wrong. Theresa May needs to get a grip and fast. I heard strong and stable more times than I could count in June. But what we have now is anything but. If members of her team cannot behave, she needs to let them go. Simple. Now is the time to drain the swamp and start afresh.
There are a lot of problems mounting up in Cabinet, but I think that it is irresponsible to say just get rid of them all and bring on the talented 2015 or 2010 intake, because then what you're doing is you're adding risk onto crisis, which is you're bringing on people who haven't run departments, have had no ministerial experience at a time when this country faces the biggest legislative challenge since 1945. What we really need to see is, far from more upheavals and distractions, evidence that Theresa May can command a strong and stable cabinet.
Are you saying this is the real reason because you fear Jeremy Corbyn coming to power?
Listen, I fear everything. I fear a lot of things. I fear the country going over a cliff and no deal, as you know. Yeah, I fear Jeremy Corbyn coming to power and requisitioning my house or whatever he might want to do. But what we want is...
How big is her house? How big is it that he requisitioned?
No, we'll be getting on to that when we talk about your tax, your tax avoidance.
Rachel, I do think... look, I fear Jeremy Corbyn coming to power, but I'm cautious of the fact that what we cannot allow is for a government so incompetent. I think it's the worst Prime Minister I can remember in my lifetime.
Who?
Theresa May. I can't think of a worse Prime Minister. Can you think of a worse?
Why do you think she's so bad?
Gordon Brown. He doesn't count. He doesn't count, really. He doesn't. He wasn't even elected. He doesn't count. I'm talking about, let's say, an elected Prime Minister.
But it's not her. It's all the people that are just trying to undermine her, not do their jobs in the way that they should. I just think that they are just knifing her in the back.
So you say more chaos is the answer?
I think that actually, I agree with you, Michelle, and I think actually, if it were just usual Tory backstabbing, it wouldn't be that bad. What's really disturbing is that even people who are not trying to bring her down seem to be bringing her down. Priti Patel, Lord knows why she thought that was an acceptable thing to do. I don't think it was calculated to bring Theresa May down. And I'm sorry to say it, but your brother, Rachel, unintentionally, clearly wasn't trying to make life more difficult for Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe, but has really balls things up for her. And I just quickly play what he said when he was giving evidence about her?
When you look at what Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe was doing, it's just, she was simply teaching people journalism, as I understand it, at the very limit.
When the Foreign Secretary makes an intervention that actually puts the fate of a British citizen further in jeopardy, that is a really serious matter and adds to a long litany of other things, as we know, that Boris has done since being Foreign Secretary, which demean the office itself, let alone the government.
That cannot be brushed aside as a mere gaffe, can it?
I don't think so.
Well, what is it then? He didn't do it deliberately.
It's worse than that.
Well, what is it then?
Well, I'm not suggesting he did it on purpose, but the consequences.
Well, then it's a gaffe, isn't it?
Well, no, gaffe understates the seriousness of what's just happened. She was dragged to court. No, it doesn't matter. No. You try telling her that. She was dragged to court the very next...
It was a mistake. I would imagine
I think there are words that are more emphatic than mistake to describe that. For example,
it was a bad mistake.
Huge F-up.
Can I just say something about Priti Patel? Yes. I think that I'm not comfortable with this analogy or comparison you're making between Priti's perceived offences and my brother's, because as far as I can see it, Priti Patel was acting as a neocon, separate arm of government, shoring up a power base and possibly to mount a challenge to Theresa May. Whereas my brother, I'm afraid to say, has been sedulously loyal to Theresa May, even though he did set out his red lines for Brexit, which actually kick-started negotiations, which had been stalled.
He's
so
not
I wanted
to go off on a frolic of his own, though, is he? I mean, I agree to a different extent, and rogue foreign policy is really dark.
Coming back to the central point, which is, so you're suggesting it would suddenly get better if the whole lot of them, if she said, right, you're out, and you're out. You think that would by necessary make it better?
What I feel is that Labour at the moment is absolutely chomping at the bit, and they must be rubbing their hands with glee. I think there's a huge amount of people that absolutely want Jeremy Corbyn to get into power, and would be very happy to see that. So with that in mind, I think that what the Tories should have been doing is trying to regroup. Actually, I personally think the best thing Theresa May could have done is, when she didn't get the result that she wanted in the election, to literally have just said, OK, Jeremy Corbyn, you take over everything then. You deal with Brexit. You deal with everything at the time. See how that works out. Got her house in order.
Michelle,
but
you're
she
playing
didn't
with the future
do
of the
that.
country.
I feel like I need to speak up in favour of Jeremy Corbyn's shadow cabinet here.
Talented
Why
Why
would you
are you
want to do such a
all?
thing?
Why this is, as you so eloquently pointed out, the most shambolic government in living memory. Why is it better to have
Because
an
the only thing
incompetent
stopping-
Conservative government
can I answer?
than a Labour government that would bring in a
because
much
I think
needed
the only
breath
thing
of fresh
stopping
air to
the most
government?
the only thing stopping the most incompetent Prime Minister in living memory from standing down is the most incompetent leader of Her Majesty's opposition in living memory
Who a lot
from
of
becoming
people
Prime
would
Minister.
want to be
It's a
Prime
legitimate
Minister.
Base
concern.
that allegation.
He's a blooming communist. Well, he's a socialist. He's a socialist, most
Disagreeing with
certainly.
someone's ideology is not the same as them
That's
being
not saying they're
He would drag this
incompetent.
country
He
back
may
to
be a
the
very
1970s.
He may be a very competent Marxist.
Yeah, well, he may well be, like Venezuela, his heroes.
But where the worst
Perhaps
of all
Hamas
worlds
and
is an
Hezbollah, also his
incompetent
heroes.
Marxist. He could be an
But don't you
Well,
think that
we know that
the-
Theresa May is an incompetent Tory.
But the
Sorry.
Tories as a team should be regrouping and saying, right, how can we have a united front? How can we have strength in what we're doing? How can we, project confidence and strong and stable? They're not doing that.
Okay, well then look what happened last week when you had Andrea Leadsom, a cabinet minister, stabbing another cabinet minister in the back, causing a resignation of Sir Michael Fallon, a long-standing servant of the party. I mean, Margaret Thatcher would be turning in her grave to see cabinet members turning upon each other and freelancing
So what should happen?
in this way.
But when I said that they were
she has
backstabbing,
to
you
impose
disagreed with me.
discipline.
No, but these people aren't backstabbing. Priti Patel had to go because she was utterly incompetent, and it was more than one offence. And just to come back, and Boris Johnson says something stupid on one occasion. This woman had...
one occasion.
No, the one we're talking
Do you
about
want me
now.
to
No, I'm
read you
sorry.
the
On one,
list?
no, where we are
Bodies
now.
in the street in Libya, Nick. That was only
that was last
a couple of months
That
ago.
was last month.
Fine, then.
No,
So he's
it was
allowed
last
one a month.
It was last month's
maybe
gap.
one every
We
6
move
weeks.
on. We move on.
But with But I still don't see, coming back to your idea, it's like a football team. Just because you sack the manager doesn't mean they automatically get better. So just because you sack all these other blokes, I still don't
Do you
see...
think people have got confidence in this
the
Tory
public
government?
or her... Or, I think
public?
the public, no. But the Conservative Party is still having a collective nervous breakdown. They haven't got over the general election. They really haven't. But I would say this to you, Majid. I actually think the great British public walked up to the edge of a cliff and went over and saw, and they don't like what they saw. I think if we had a general election today...
vote for him again?
They wouldn't. Corbyn wouldn't do anything like us well. I
hope
think
not.
they would play
would.
with the...
No, I disagree
Do you think
with
they
you.
vote for
Even if Theresa May stays
I
at
think
the helm.
Conservatives would do better.
This
No,
Conservative government would do better in
I
an
do.
election.
I do.
There's a
I do.
huge
I think they
amount
walked
of
up to the
people.
edge of the... and they
There's
wouldn't
a
want to
huge
go
amount
back.
of people that love Jeremy Corbyn
I'm
and
one of
would
them.
vote for him. A huge amount of people. And I would
Yes.
actually say that that's... Because the Tories, they seem to be... So many people on the street are perceiving the Tories as really hurting the people at the bottom. They really... And I don't see why the Tories can't grasp that, actually. When you're at the bottom and you're struggling, I think they can't grasp it because they've never had proper experience of that. And there is a huge amount of people that I know and that I talk to that would give anything for Labour and Jeremy Corbyn to be in power. That's what they want.
There are loads of people also who would like to see the Conservatives gain proper control and be an effective
The
government. There are
really
people out there as
depressing
well.
thing
They
about
wouldn't vote
this
for that
is
today.
usually I would be happy at a Conservative government showing itself to be so incompetent because it would make way for Labour. But the problem is we are facing this existential crisis of Brexit. We can't afford to have a vacuum
And
government
Corbyn's a
and no one
Brexiteer,
can
you know
celebrate
that, yeah?
this.
Corbyn's the man you're a fan of. is
Labour
Brexiteer.
Party policy is not...
And Corbyn is, though, isn't he?
He
He voted. He voted against the European Union from before I was born.
I know.
That's how long he's been a Brexiteer.
I know he is not a lifelong passionate Remainer. I will give you that.